Hello, my name is Mike Panaki. I'm owner of Network Protocol Specialists, LLC here in Seattle, Washington. So you could say, why am I doing this? This quick start, because I do training on these tools. And so this is a great opportunity for you to learn a little bit about the tool and you to know that if you need more in-depth training on this, that we can set that up for you and we can do that training. So let's start with one of the questions here. If you look over on this side, you see I've got a one-touch back here. So one of the questions that just came in is, what's one of the differences between the EtherScope nXG and the one-touch? Well, what we're going to find is that with the EtherScope nXG, one of the biggest differences is that it is an Android-based device. So not only can I use the applications that NetAlly has for it, but I can load other applications on there. So it becomes more of a universal test tool other than one that is really specifically designed to do a number of things. Here's the other big one, and that is that we saw this platform come out. And I'm going to do an overview of the physical interfaces on it here in just a second. But this supports 802.11 AC. I would expect that we're going to see AX in the future here at some point. It supports 10 gig, supports copper and fiber. It has the wireless tools and the wired tools built in. It does discovery beyond the local broadcast domain. That one touch back there, great tool, but it was only ever designed to discover the local broadcast domain. What we're going to find is with the EtherScope nXG, if you're familiar with something like the OptiView XG, this is much closer to the capabilities when it comes to doing discovery of the OptiView XG than what we see with the One Touch. The Wi-Fi capabilities go way beyond what the One Touch could do as far as telling us what's happening with our wireless networks. In fact, one of the things I'll touch on in here is what's called breaking the layer 2 ceiling. And what breaking the layer 2 ceiling means is that this EtherScope nXG is going in and just constantly scanning the wireless network. It's then going to combine what it's discovered on the wired side with what it discovered on the wireless side to give us an unparalleled view of what's happening on our wired and wireless networks at the same time. So it really takes what the One Touch could do, what the Link Runner G2 could do, what the AirCheck can do, and it's combining this all into one platform. Here's the other thing. We are just scratching the surface on what applications are available. The hardest part is coming up with the hardware, because once you get the hardware done, you get the board designed, you get that manufactured, that's very difficult to change. Applications are one of those things that we can change just like that, right? New software, new version, which, by the way, there is a new version coming out tomorrow, April 22nd, that will include things like the AirMapper. We're going to take a look at AirMapper, and it's going to give us some features when we're doing things like multi-gig. So we're going to take a look at a few of those new features in the quick start today, plus many of the basic things that this tester does. So before I start sharing the screen of the tester, let's go in and let's switch over here to take a look at the interfaces on this. So we'll zoom in here. So up here on the top, we've got an SFP cage. This supports both gig and 10 gig SFP. So when it comes to fiber, I can plug in and connect to fiber at gig or 10 gig. The copper port on this supports 10, 100, 1000, 2.5 gig, 5 gig, and 10 gig. So we can do 10 gig line rate packet capture and throughput testing using the copper port or the fiber port. Now, we can't do PoE with the fiber port, but we can do PoE up to 90 watts with the copper port on here. So we can test PoE, and if we have class 4 PoE or better, it will charge the EtherScope. And if we have less than class 3, it'll extend the life of the battery, but it won't charge it. We have a USB port up here on the top. What could we plug into that? Well, I've plugged in a USB to HDMI adapter and used DisplayLink to mirror the display. I could plug a barcode scanner in. I could plug a USB drive in here. So when I've gone in to transfer the maps or the floor plans to do my wireless heat map, I just went in, put those on a USB drive, popped it right in here, copied those files over there. I've got a connection for an external antenna, and I'll show that to you as well. We can use that for locating devices on the wireless network. We've got volume up and volume down buttons. And over here, we have our management port / AirMapper or cable test port. We've got a micro SD port. We've got our power USB-C power port right there. And on the back, let me unplug my power, I've got a flashlight, and I've got a camera. Now, I'm holding this up using a 3D printed stand that's available out on Thingiverse. So if you look for NetAlly out on Thingiverse, they've got these stands out there. And I bought some fluorescent green filament, put some little rubber feet on there. Thanks to Bob Vixie out there at NetAlly, he designed those stands. Now we've got a little stand to hold that up. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to come in and I'm going to start a share. We'll share that screen. So there is the home screen of our EtherScope nXG. So up here at the top, just a few things about the icons that we see. Right there, there are two and you can change the video window on here if you want. You can drag that to make the video bigger if you want to. You know, make me really tiny too if you don't really want to look at me. But what you'll notice is up there that's scanning through. So this is not connected to any particular wireless network right now. What it's doing is it's scanning through all the channels, figuring out what clients we have out there, what access points we have, what interferers we have, and looking at our wireless network as a whole. Right here are 100%. This is showing me that my discovery has completed. My discovery is 100% complete. If I restart my discovery, that'll go back to 0 and work its way up. Now, once that discovery is complete, it's going to combine the wired discovery with the wireless discovery so we can get a really good picture of what's going on. Here I'm connected via VNC. I've got my management port going, and I've got my management network. So we could come in, we could look at what we're seeing there. So that tells us that we have multiple management port connections, and we're connected on our wired port right up here. Now, the EtherScope nXG has 2 Wi-Fi radios, and it has 2 wired ports. So the 2 wired ports, the one on the side, management port, the one on the top, network port. The wireless, it's got 2 802.11 AC radios in it. It's got a 1x1 for the management, and it's got a 4x4 for the network. So that means that I could connect to my Wi-Fi network using the management wireless. I could then remote into the EtherScope nXG remotely, and I could do a VNC into it. And I'm going to show you, there's a really neat feature if you have Ally Care support where we can remote in through Link Live. I'll show that to you in just a little bit. But now I can remote into it. So let's say that you have a problem out at a remote location, and especially right now. You can't travel out to that remote location very easily, if at all, but you can ship your EtherScope nXG out there. Now, what I did was I bought this little case, little, maybe not so little. I bought this case on Amazon before everything really got locked down. And in this case, I've got some slots. So I've got my power supply, I've got my test accessory, I've got a Link Runner G2 right here, I've got a slot for my EtherScope nXG, and I've got some patch cables. I've got some different SFPs in here. But now I can put my equipment in there, lock that up, put a lock on it, label, ship it out to the remote site. So now when it gets out to the remote site, they can connect the EtherScope up to the wireless network. Now I say, hey, drag down from the top, give me the management IP. I can VNC in, now I'm looking over their shoulder. So let's take a look at what's going on. So now the person at the remote site can plug it in and do things. I can reach over their shoulder and I can take a look and see what they're doing. Or they can just hold it and I can push the buttons. So from a remote standpoint, really powerful tool. Also, sometimes I don't want to use the touchscreen. Now this has Bluetooth in it. I could connect a Bluetooth keyboard to it. I could connect a barcode scanner. I've even got this little Epson Bluetooth battery-powered label printer. So we could connect that to it and use that to produce labels. So there's all kinds of neat things we could do. Stop that from bouncing around. So in this case, where do we start with our EtherScope nXG? Well, I've got it plugged into a PoE switch, connected to it via the management port. So I VNC'd in. So let's do this. We're going to click on AutoTest. AutoTest is where I can go in and use the network port up at the top, or the test Wi-Fi adapter to go in and connect up to a network. So I'm going to hit start. So in this case, this is using the native VLAN. It's going to connect to my switch. And what it does is it showed that our switch is advertising 10100 gig. We connected at gig. Switch is advertising both half and full duplex. We connected at full. We are on the untagged VLAN, but we've seen VLANs 10, 14, and 12 on this port. We're connected to the studio desk switch, port 6. We got a DHCP address right here, and it tells us how long did it take us to get this address, and it would tell us if we saw more than one offer. Somebody brings in a rogue DHCP server, we can use this as a way to detect that. Okay. I'll tap on back. It shows me my DNS. So I've got 2 DNS servers. I could connect to both. I got to my office router, and in fact, one of the features that we have in here is our path analysis. We're going to dig into path analysis, but path analysis occurs at both layer 2 and layer 3. So if I say do a path analysis to my router, and I say start, what it's going to do is it's going to say that we leave the EtherScope nXG. We come into the studio desk switch on interface gig 6. We go out gig 8. We come in gig 8 of the NPS GS108T, which is in the rack of equipment I have right here. We come out port 1. We go into an unknown switch. Then we come in on Ether 4 into my primary router. That is the layer 2 path that I take to my router. I know what switch ports I'm using, what VLANs I'm using to connect there. That is some pretty powerful information, because to get the layer 2 path, otherwise we'd have to start going in and tugging on cables. So I'm going to go back, and it shows me I connected to Google, I connected to my email server, I connected to NetAlly. So these are test targets I've added in there. But what this does is this tells me I was able to very quickly connect in on my native VLAN. Now we could go into our configuration right here. We can do things like I just told you that this is a PoE switch. So I could say PoE, let's do a PoE test. And we're going to do true power. Now, much like with the Link Runner G2, true power draws power. It applies a certain load based on what power class we select. So in this case, I could go all the way up to class 8, which is about 71 watts at the powered device, which is 90 watts at the power source. I'm going to say class 3 right here. Now it supports things like UPoE, if that's where we're using. This switch right here maxes out at class 3. So I'm going to come back. We could select what authentication we're using. Are we doing auto? Are we forcing the speed and duplex? We can set a VLAN tag. We can set static IP addresses. We can say what DNS name do we want to test. And we can select what test targets we want to test. Now, here's kind of a unique thing. And that is with these test targets. Notice that 10.0.0.50 is not selected. My test targets, think of this as a library of test targets. I can turn these test targets off and on for a test. Ideally, I will not want to delete them, because here's the thing. If NetAlly is used in multiple test profiles, if I delete it, it will delete it from all of those profiles. There exists one NetAlly test target. Each profile references that test, that particular test. I could say I want to add a test, and I could say I want to add an HTTP test, and I could come in here, and I could say I want to go to HTTPS www.nps-llc.com. I'll say OK. And it puts the name up there. It says we're going to do IPv4. We're going to allow redirects. And we can say what size do we want to transfer? What does the return code need to be? It must contain this and must not contain this. So we could say, you know, if it's got this information up there, something's wrong. Or if this information isn't out there, something is wrong. So I just added that test. So I'll come back. So there's my website. So it's going to test that as well. Now I could say, you know what? We don't need to test Google. We'll test these other ones. And we're going to add 50 in there. That's my voice over IP server. So now we've got this test set up, and it's going to test PoE this time. So let's go ahead and hit start. So now it's running 12 tests, and it's testing to make sure that we have PoE and that we can get class 3 PoE. So what could cause us not to get class 3 PoE? Something like copper-cladded aluminum wire. We may see up to 5 times the resistance with this wire that we see with other cabling, with pure copper cabling. And so that would cause our voltage to drop below the 37 volt minimum we're looking for when we draw that much power. The thing is that if we don't apply the power, the load, we won't see the voltage drop. So in this case, we're connecting up, it's going through, it's running all of the tests, it's connecting to our various TCP ports, it's pinging that. We come back, we get a green link. Everything worked, and we get this link right here. That tells us that the network port is linked to the network using this IP address of 10.0.11.110. Why is that important? When we go in and do our discovery, when we go in and do our throughput testing using iPerf and using the performance measurement, when we do some of our other tests in here, we need to be linked to the network. Now, we can be linked to the wired network, but still just discovering the wireless network. That's a pretty handy feature. So let me come back out. That was one profile. Once I come into this screen, where I see just that profile up there, this is my profile groups. So what I can do with my profile groups is I can choose multiple profiles. So I could say I want to do PR Home 5G, PR Home. I want to do OfficeNet. I want to do GuestNet. And I want to do VLANs 10, 12, and 14. I'm going to hit start. So we're going to let that run. It's going to take it a little bit. What we've done is we've built all these individual profiles. The EtherScope nXG is now going out and it is going to run those sequentially. And it's going to show us that icon right there to let us know if it could connect to each one of those. So now You are the network engineer. You've designed the network. You know what VLANs need to be out there, what wireless networks need to be out there. So what you can do is you can build a profile group like this. You can hand this to a lower level technician. You can say, go out and run these tests. And this is a very quick way to validate that you have the connectivity that you expect. Validation is so important. I'm a big measurement person. If you were to look around at all the stuff I have in here, I have all kinds. I've got oscilloscopes. I've got, well, here, we even have this little nifty deal. This is a voltmeter. Well, that's running. Here's a voltmeter from the signal core that my wife's uncle gave me. And so he knows I love measurement tools. So I've got all kinds of measurement tools in here, because if we can't measure something, how do we know it's working properly? So now we've connected to the native VLAN, we've connected to the guest net, the office net on Wi-Fi. We connected to PR Home. Now we're going to test PR Home 5G. So if we look at the guest net, it shows us that we connected. It tells us what channel. It tells us what AP. It tells us our IP address. It shows us that we were able to get out to the internet. I'll go back. OfficeNet, connected there, tells me what my PHY rate is. I can expand that. Look at all of this information that it collected about that connection, about my utilization, my signal to noise ratio, my retries. That was all collected during that time I was connecting to that and running those tests. PR Home 5G, we failed. And this shows that we could not connect to that AP. So I'm going to want to come back and take a look at what's going on with PR Home 5G. That is not good that we couldn't connect to that. So now we're doing VLAN 10. We're going to do VLAN 12, VLAN 14. 10 worked. Let's hope 12 works. 14. So now with the push of one button, this is testing 1, 2, 3, 4 wireless networks, a native VLAN, and 3 tagged VLANs. And I could build these ahead of time. And you remember, I picked most all of those just by checking them off. I've already built the profiles for those. I already know what test targets I'm interested in for each one. I have set what I expect to happen, and it is comparing the results here with what I expect to have happen. So I could look at VLAN 10. See what's configured out there. We'll go back. We'll let 14 finish up. Being able to compare what you're seeing with what you expect gives you a quick and easy way to make sure that things are working properly. Don't use the S word, should. That should be on the right VLAN. You should have the connectivity you need here. This gives us a way to go in and validate that for each one of these networks. So now I know that out of all the stuff I need to look at, PR Home 5G is the network I need to figure out what is going on. Why is that not working properly? Why couldn't I connect to that? Now, as I'm doing this, I am hearing ding, 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 ding. Because what's going on? What's going on is that in the background, I'm getting emails for each one of these tests. So let me go out and bring up my email here. Well, I'm going to do that in a little bit when I show you Link Live, because I need to share the whole screen instead of just the app. But what I am going to do is I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to, let's see. Well, we can come in here, and I can add a comment. We'll spell studio right today. Studio 54, how about that? Okay. So I'm going to save that to my test results. All right. I have looked at this enough times that I have not seen connection log before. So we're going to save that. That may be something. Well, this is version 1.1. Let's go back in. Let's do one of our Wi-Fi networks here. Sometimes I got to get in and click on these things just to see. I'm going to say save the connection log. We're going to say add. We're going to add comments. Let's add a comment here real quick. We're going to say studio 54. So we'll save that with this wireless one as well. I'll show you how that shows up in Link Live. So now we've gone in, we've run our tests. Okay. So AutoTest is one of those things that we can use day in, day out. Go in and validate. I don't want to hear that you've left this sitting in your desk drawer. When I went out and did the training on the OptiView, I heard enough times, well, it's sitting in the drawer, we don't use it very often, we only bring it out when there's a problem. Don't do that. This is a beautiful validation tool that you can use. It's the best validation tool. No, it's really a good validation tool, and it is the features that we have with something like the Link Runner G2, but we can run multiple profiles at the same time. So it gives us a way to compare what we expect with what we're seeing to find out if we're getting that. And if we're not, it tells us what we're not getting. Okay? Now, let's go ahead and come down here into Discovery. So if I come into Discovery and I take a look at what it discovered 95 devices. That's a lot of devices for my little network. So if I go into my my Discovery configuration right here, and we're going to go into Discovery settings. Discovery uses SNMP to communicate with the routers and switches. So, and any other SNMP device. So in this case, I have SNMP version 1 and 2 turned on. And I can go in and set my community strings. I'm a little embarrassed that my community strings are public and private. But we can add our own community strings. I don't want you using public and private. That's not okay. We need to make sure that we have that secured. And if you really want to secure it, you could use SNMP version 3 on your devices. And in that case, we could provide the credential set in there necessary to communicate with those devices. I could come in and say, which ports do I want to use for my Discovery? So in this case, I'm using my wired port, my Wi-Fi port, my wired management port, my Wi-Fi management port. I'm going to discover on all 4 of the available interfaces. Extended ranges. This is a very cool feature. And actually, I'm going to turn these off. I'm not using those networks right now. We're going to turn on this network, this one, and this one. Now, I can come in and add IP subnets. I could say add, and I could put in the address and the subnet mask and say whether that is active or not. What this does is this will go out and reach out into those networks. 10.0.12 is UTA's network. UTA works with me. UTA has a little network out there, and I want to be able to reach out and take a look at what's happening with her network. So in that case, I could go in and I could do that. Let me just check something here. Okay. So I specify all the IP subnets I want to discover. So I select those. Now it's gone out and discovered those. So if we come back, now we have 112 devices. So I've got some unknown switches. Now an unknown switch is a switch where I'll go to connected devices. This shows me that I've got my PoE switch, my upstairs AP, and I've got this device right here. This tells me I've got a switch out there that is not manageable. And I can start getting an idea of where that switch is. But if somebody puts a little unmanaged switch underneath their desk, this gives me a way I can go out and figure out that I see multiple devices connected to the same Ethernet port. Maybe there's an unmanaged device out there. So we can come through, and here's some pretty cool ones. I've assigned names to a lot of these devices. So like right here, here's Wi-Fi outlet number 4. So I have a number of Wi-Fi outlets that I've deployed around my home and my office. So this is number 4. It gives me the MAC address. It says it's authorized. And I went through and I used the tools to authorize that. So I said, you know what? I'm going to give it a name, and that's authorized to be on my network. We can use this as a way to go in and find devices that are new on our network. It's connected to the downstairs AP. It's connected to PR Home. It's using this encryption. Now, if I wanted to drill in even more, I could click on the MAC address. And it's going to show me the signal strength, the 802.11 channel. It's going to show me the SSID, what BSSID it's connected to. And I could come in here and I could click on RF and traffic statistics. We could start monitoring that device over time. Now, this is a client. So the client only transmits when it has something to say. It's not sending out beacons. So interestingly enough, we see that, periodically it's sending out something. I could come back. I could say if I wanted to know what that something was, I could do a Wi-Fi packet capture. There is not an easier way to capture on your wireless network than being able to come in and say, oh, that Wi-Fi outlet, what's that doing? I hit capture. Now it's set up the channel width, the BSSID, so I could hit start. And now I'm capturing the wireless frames going to and from that outlet. Now they're encrypted because I'm using WPA2 on here. But if I put in the passphrase, if I download this into Wireshark and I put in the passphrase, I could decrypt those frames if I get the 4-way handshake. So really, to be able to decode that wireless traffic, I need to be able to see when it connects to the AP, and then I could start going in and decrypting that. All right, so we're going to stop that capture. And I'm going to cancel. We're not going to bother saving that one just yet. We'll back up. Now, I'm going to sit down for a second. We've been doing these webcasts for just a little bit. Let's zoom in here. There we go. So in this case, what we see right here is that it is taking, notice up here at the top, it's scanning. It's scanning through our wireless channels, and it's taking what it discovered on the wired side of each one of these subnets and it's combining it with that wireless discovery. So in things like this Vizio TV downstairs, we have not connected to the wireless network as part of this discovery. But what we're doing is we're taking this IP address and MAC address we discovered, we're taking the wireless information that shows the associations, that MAC is associated with this AP, and it's giving me that information. So it's giving me a very comprehensive discovery of what I found out there. Now, in the case of Uta's office, let's say I want to drill in on that. You've got a network with thousands of devices. So now we want to drill in and just look at the devices on that subnet. That's where I can click on filter. And these are all the different things I can filter on in my discovery. So I could say I want to filter on device types. So I want to see all my switches. Okay? So I could come back, and these are all of my different switches. So I could say, Uta's switch. I'm going to drill into that. It tells me which VLANs are supported on that switch. It shows us the interfaces. It shows us the SNMP information. So that switch has been up for 13 weeks. So I'm going to go into interfaces. And it now shows me that I could say, you know what? I want to see device count. So it shows me how many devices are on each one of those switch ports. So I could say, gig 7, what's going on there? So I can see in this case, it's got this endpoint connected there. We could go to devices. Actually, it shows me that twice. That's kind of interesting. Hang on. We'll edit that out of the recorded version. I really am out in, this is my home studio / workshop / laboratory. So I do have an air compressor out here, which always kicks on at the most inopportune time. But if I come in here to interface gig 3, this tells me that the device connected to that is Uta's desk phone. Uta lives, it's about a 30-minute drive from here. So if I want to be able to see what information is going on with her switch, I can come out here and take a look at that. I can take a look at the statistics. What does the utilization look like on that? Anytime I go into these graphs, this will graph this out over a 24-hour period. Now I can zoom in, I can move the time across, but let's say that we came back here and I said, interface gig 1. Okay, that's her router. So if I clicked on statistics, I could graph out what does the utilization look like on the port going to her router. So this goes beyond just discovering, but now I can start drilling in and taking a look at things like utilization. And in fact, I could even filter on utilization to say, show me which ports have the highest utilization. Right there. Now, in this case, they're all gig ports and she's on a pretty small network. So it's not going to be that big, we're not going to see that big a deal. Now, if we back out a little bit more, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my filters. I'm going to remove switches. I'm going to go into subnets. I'm going to say, show me her whole subnet. We're going to go back. Shows me all the devices out there. So if I said, hey, that Raspberry Pi I have out there for doing network monitoring, what port's that plugged into? Well, it's not going to show me. Ugh. How about her color printer? Okay, it tells me that the printer is plugged into port 4 of the switch. I was able to go out there and figure out where that's connected without having to ask her to tell me. So being able to come in and start getting an idea of what's going on with that, I can even go into my SNMP here, tells me how long that printer's been up. And, is that working? There's the backup NAS. So I could say, for that backup network attached storage, is that out there? And from here, I could bring up my whole tool set. I could say, I want to do a port scan on that network attached storage. Let's do that real quick. So we're going to hit start. This is going to show me which ports are open of the scan list. And I can modify that scan list if I want. There's actually quite a few ports open on that thing. So we have a whole set of tools that we can run against each one of the different devices out here and see what those results are. So we can, I guess we haven't hit anything where we need to scroll up yet. But so far we've seen 10 open ports on there. There's 11. So it shows me which ports are open. Okay. So I can come back. There's my results from my port scan. We'll come back here. Now, We can go in, we can remove our filter. We can take and we can build on those filters. I could say, show me all the switches and routers for that subnet. And it will show me those devices that satisfy that filter. Come back. We can remove all those filters. So now after I'm done with my discovery, I can come in here and I could say I want to upload that discovery to Link Live. Okay. I'll save that up to Link Live. Now, one of the questions, after discovery, is it possible to draw a network map? No, it's not. I hope that at some point that is a possibility. But as it stands right now, we're going to be able to go in and see everything that's in that discovery, but actually drawing a map out is not something that we have the capability of doing yet. Okay. So I've got my discovery. I uploaded the results of that. I come back. Let's take a look at Wi-Fi. So in this case, I go into my Wi-Fi and start scanning through and showing me what's going on each one of my channels. It shows the number of APs, shows the number of clients, shows the channel. So in this case, and we can see the number of retries. So it looks like channel 11 is pretty busy. So I could click on channel 11. I could say, show me the channel details. So if you were with me for the AirCheck G2 session, you're going to see that there's a lot of similarity there. We're able to get some of that information. Some of the big differences are, I can come in here and I go to RF and traffic stats. It is going to graph out the strongest AP. It's going to graph out utilization over time. So what does my utilization look like here? Is this heavily utilized? Or do I see spikes in utilization? If somebody is complaining about connectivity, I could set this up and it's going to show me the last 24 hours of what's been going on that channel. And notice up here at the top, we're not scanning anymore. We've now locked into channel 11. We're looking at what's going on with that channel. And we see that we've got our utilization for both 802.11 and non-802.11. Because I don't want to destroy my wireless network right now, I won't turn it on, but I've got an old X10 color camera that operates at 2.4 gigahertz. When I turn that on, we see our non-802.11 utilization go through the roof and everybody drops off the network. It's a rotten thing to do, but it's a good way to demonstrate what we see in here. So what we see is that most of our utilization is 802.11 utilization. Shows our retry rate, gives us an idea of what's going on. So now we could come back and I could say, what BSS IDs do I have out here? And right here, it's showing utilization. So I could see which BSS ID, which AP is using up most of the bandwidth. Looks like it's a tie between Netgear 77 and PR Home and PR Guest. So if I came into this one, I could look at the statistics just for that AP. In fact, if I look at that, it's going to show me utilization, and it shows what's the utilization for the overall channel and what is the utilization for just this particular AP. Now, somebody asked a question, what is the retry rate? So what happens is on wired, when I send a packet, I pretty much expect that packet's going to get to the other end of the wire. Wireless, not so. So what we find with wireless is when I send that packet, I expect an acknowledgement to come back and say, got it. If I don't get that acknowledgement, I will resend that wireless frame. But what I do is I set a bit in the wireless header. And that bit is the retry bit. And that says, this is a reattempt. We're retrying to send this. So if I see my retry rate go up, that can be an indication that we have contention or we have interference. Or we can run into what's known as the hidden node problem. The way I explain that is, if I'm standing in the front yard and I've got one of my kids is out by the street. My kids are old enough they can be out by the street and I don't worry about it because the youngest is 18. So in this case, I could have one out by the street and I could have another one back in the garage. And they're both trying to talk to me at the same time, but neither one of them can hear each other. So in that case, they both think that they have clear airspace to talk to me. And because I'm hearing both of them, I can't understand either one of them. So we can run into situations where two clients can't hear each other. So one of them says, hey, I'm going to talk, and the other one doesn't hear it, and it talks at the same time. And we end up we have collisions out there as far as our wireless signal when it reaches the access point. Access point doesn't acknowledge one of them or either of them, and they have to resend that traffic. So retry rates can be an indicator that we are having to resend frames. And if we have to resend enough, we will back down on our speed. So this can cause slower data transfer rates. So by monitoring our retry rate, what we'll see is if retries start going up, our data rates will start going down. Our utilization could stay the same or get higher because we're having to take longer to send the same amount of information. So retries, we're keeping an eye on those. Right now, we see that our percent retries, our average is less than 1%. That is really good. So what that's telling us is that the devices that are on this network are letting each other know how long they're going to talk. They're avoiding collision avoidance. And we see that, we've got about 14% utilization on that channel. So that channel is utilized, but it's operating in a way we would expect it to operate. Okay. So let's come back. We can see what clients we have out there. So if I click on clients, now I can see which client is using up most of the bandwidth. So I can really get in there and see, is somebody downloading a big file? Is that what's causing the problem out there? Now, I'm going to take this Wi-Fi information and I'm going to click on Upload to Link Live. We're going to upload that. I'm going to say Save to Analysis Files. We're going to come back. Okay. Now, there is so much to cover on this, and a little quick start is really hard to cover everything. So we're going to take a look at, we can do iPerf testing with this. So I can say, I want to do a throughput test. So in this case, I could come in and I could say, I want to configure this. And I'm going to click on IPv4 address. Now, what it's going to do is if I blank that out, it's going to go up to Link Live. Because I've claimed this to Link Live. It's going to go out to Link Live and it's going to say, hey, what test accessories do we know about? And that's a test accessory. I can point at it right there behind me. So that is a little PoE powered iPerf server. And that is 108. So I could select that test accessory. Now I could use I could run iPerf on my Mac, I could run it on a Linux box, I could run it on Windows, but in this case, I'm running it on that, I'm using that test accessory. In fact, go out and check out NetAlly's website right now. They've got a 2-for-1 deal going, where if you buy a Link Sprinter, right here, I think it's, you check what the 2-for-1 deal is. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but you can get a test accessory out there. And I think it's, if you buy a Link Sprinter, you can get a test accessory or vice versa, or it's a 2-for-1 deal. Go check it out. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit start right here. So it's going to start doing a throughput test. Now with those test accessories, those things max out at about 500 megabits per second in each direction. So right now I'm seeing, hey, I'm getting throughput, and my throughput up, I'm getting a max of 500 megabits per second. and an average of 482 megabits per second through my network. I'd come in here and I could say, what are we getting for this? Shows my throughput down. Now in my configuration, I can change which interface I'm using. So I could run this through the wireless port. I could take a look at what my wireless throughput looks like. So that's iPerf. And I could take my iPerf test results. I could upload those to Link Live. Now, let's come back here. My performance test will work with the Link Runner G2, the software endpoint that I can download for free from the NetAlly website, with another EtherScope nXG, a one-touch AT10 gig, or an OptiView XG. I can use those as an endpoint. With the performance test, I can do up to 10 gigabit throughput testing. But we're coming up with just a few minutes to the hour. So what I want to do is I'm going to come over here. We're going to fire up my other EtherScope nXG. Okay. This is the one that's got the latest and greatest version of code loaded on it. So we're going to stop the share for just a second. This is the version of code that's going to be coming out tomorrow. So let's plug that one in. And as soon as that comes up and I can get an IP address on that, we will VNC into it. Which I already know what that address is. It's always the same. Let me bring that up. All right. Let's share that. So now we're going to move over to some of the new features we're going to see coming out tomorrow. The biggest difference you're going to see with the software that comes out tomorrow, and this is available to anybody that has an EtherScope nXG, is AirMapper. So if I click on AirMapper, what we're going to see is that here we have a floor plan. Now what I can do is I could come in and I could say, I want to configure this and I want to bring in a picture, an image. This is going to be my floor plan. So in this case, I happen to have the blueprints for my house. So I took a picture of those blueprints with my phone, put the JPEG on a USB drive, plugged it into the EtherScope nXG, transferred that file over. Then I give it a signal propagation. Now the signal propagation is going to say that for this distance, if I'm standing here, or if I'm standing 10 feet over, the signal strength is going to be the same. If I am in a walled office, if I'm in a hotel, if I'm in a place where I have quite a few walls and so on, I will typically use a signal propagation of about 10 feet. If I was outside, so I did one where we did an outside wireless survey, I might use a signal propagation of 250 feet. So that signal propagation is going to change based on what obstacles and what things we would have that would attenuate the signal. Do we have cubicle walls? Do we have concrete walls? Do we have drywall walls? What do I have and how restricted is that space? So now I've selected the map for the first floor. I'm going to rotate that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to pinch and zoom. And I'm going to come over here to the living room. And I'm going to say, I'm going to start doing my wireless survey. So I'll click on Start. I'll come in here and I'll say, I'm going to stand right here. And I'll click. Now you notice it turns red. This is now going through and scanning all the channels. As soon as it's done scanning the channels, then it turns green. So now I'm ready to move on. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to stand in this corner and I'm going to take a measurement. Now you notice that these two circles overlap. So this starts giving me an idea of I'm taking full advantage of my coverage there. So what I do is I'll come over here and I'll stand right there and I'll take a measurement there. And again, this does not indicate coverage. When I click on it, it is showing me that I'm taking a reading. Then I'm going to come over here and I'll click right there and take a reading. Now you notice I've missed a spot in the middle of the room. So the idea behind these green and red circles is to ensure that as I'm doing my wireless survey, that I'm getting complete coverage. So I could come over here, stand in the middle of the room, and take a measurement there. Now, take my fingers. As soon as that one's done, I'm going to pinch and zoom in. And I could say, you know what? I'm going to take a measurement right there. Okay? So I can start working my way through doing this wireless measurement. So I'll stand right there on the entrance to the kitchen. Take a measurement there. So I can work my way through this building, this office, the stadium, taking the measurements. What you find is that the setup and configuration for doing this measurement is really easy. I could send the pictures out and I could do that. So in this case, one of the questions was, the values are only on click. Yes. So we don't set the auto measurement. So where we set up a path, right? So if you use Survey Pro, you know that you can say, I'm going to start here, and then we walk to the other end of the building, then we click and it shows the measurements it took along the path. Right now, I have to click to take a measurement. Number two, this is a passive survey. So what we're doing is we're listening and we're taking a measurement, okay? Now, let's come in and we can take a look at our AirMapper settings. Very simple settings in here, right? I go to my general settings, but really, we are coming down to, this is a very, I hate to say simple test. There's a lot of code. There's a lot that goes into this, but what it's doing is it's mapping out what the results were for each one of these locations. So this is a new feature that's available on every EtherScope once you download the new version of code. Now, I'm going to go ahead and hit stop. Now, I could resume, or I could come in and say, I want to upload that out there. I'm going to say, we're going to say first floor. I'm going to say QS 0420. I always do that just to keep track of those files. So I'm going to upload that. So it's uploading that to Link Live. So now let's stop the share. Let's share the whole screen. So let's go grab Link Live. Okay. We're going to come out here, and what you're going to notice with Link Live is a few things. One is we have a new button right there. So tomorrow, Link Live is going to, it could be it's updated already, but tomorrow you're going to see that there is a new button out there for AirMapper. And when I click on that, it's going to show my wireless surveys. So in this case, I could click on first floor. And I could come over here and you know what? I overwrote that survey. We're going to go with the second floor because what happened was the survey I just did, I never moved it, right? But here's the cool thing. You could go in and you could remote into the EtherScope nXG and be looking over the shoulder of the person doing the survey. You could remote in via the management port. It's going to take the readings from the test Wi-Fi adapter. So let's come over here. I'm going to say view survey. So now, here's our test. Here's what our results look like. So we could start doing some things like I could come in and I could set my minimum signal strength. I could say 70 dB. And in this case, it shows, hey, we've got coverage in there for that. Now, in this case, I can set filters. And this is where the features that you have with non-Ally Care and Ally Care are going to come in as far as filters that we can set up and so on. But I could say, I'm going to uncheck all my SSIDs, and I could say, just show me the coverage for Netgear 77 5G. And I'll hit apply. So now it's going to go in and take a look at my measurements, and it's going to tell me where do I have coverage for that particular network. So it'll tell me, hey, this is where we have neg 70 or better for that network. So it says, yeah, we saw it out into here, but this is where we got negative 70 or better. And I could go in and I could click. It's going to show me the nearest measurement point, and it's going to show me what the signal strength was at that point. So I could come out here and click. I see I got negative 77 out there. I got negative 83 there. I got negative 76 in the bathroom right there. Whoops. So we went back. So in this case, okay, there's my first floor when I took it back, when I did the measurement back on the 16th. So now there's the first floor coverage. So again, I could go into filters. Okay. Yeah, so you're going to need to be able to do the filters and everything. You're going to need to upgrade. You're going to need to have Ally Care. So you're going to need to have paid support. Another feature that is a really neat one with paid support is remotely connecting to the unit. So in this case, let me switch over here. I'm going to turn off VNC. Let's say I sent this out to you. I sent an EtherScope out to you, and you said, hey, I want to be able to connect in, and I need you to take a look at my network. What's going to happen is when you connect it up to the network, when you connect that management port up, I get a little green remotely connect to the unit. So now I could come in here, we could slide over, and I could say remote in. So it is going to connect through the web interface here, out through the internet, into that EtherScope nXG. So this allows me to remote into an EtherScope nXG where I don't have access to that IP subnet. I don't have to have a VPN connection. I don't have to have, I don't have to be able to connect directly into that network. So I'm going to be able to come in here, let's zoom out, and connect into that. So we could come in here and we could start driving that EtherScope nXG through this remote interface. Okay. Let's do that one more time there. Okay, so it's going to establish that connection out there to that EtherScope. There we go. See if we can refresh that screen there. All right, live demos. We'll have to take a look and see on that one why it's not giving me that whole screen. So there's one other thing I want to show you that's a new feature, and I know that we're going over the hour. There we go. That looks a lot better. So now I can come in here and click on AutoTest, and so I'm driving that remotely. So I could rerun my AutoTest. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to, let's close this up. Let's close that. Let's close this. There's one other one I want to show you, and that is that if you are doing multi-gig, so with multi-gig, that is where we're running at, let me find my cable here. This is where we're doing both, 100/gig/2.5/5. You're trying to figure out why you're not getting 5 gigabits per second out of your multi-gig switch. One of the new features with this latest software release let's see. Is let's see. There we go. I'm going to hit start. So I've got this plugged into a switch that supports multi-gig on the wired port. Go in and just take a look. It's not updating like I want it to. These live demos. Let's see. We're going to turn that off real quick. Sorry. Well, I've done something here. We're just going to restart that real quick. So, great time to ask questions if you have any questions. I'm going to go ahead and restart that and see. So, I mean, we're into it for an hour and 15 right now. I want to say first off, I really appreciate everyone joining on. I hope that what we've covered so far has been useful as far as learning some more about what we can do, what you can do with the EtherScope nXG. Like I said, this is being recorded, so an email will go out tomorrow. It'll have a link to the recorded version of this session. We are back up and running again. So let me reconnect. There we go. We'll bring that over here. All right, so I'm going to go to my AutoTest. Oh. Well, I have managed to break something. And I know the thing you'd love to see me do is spend the rest of the day troubleshooting it. But we're going to come in and we're going to take a look. There we go. So now I've got my multi-gig right there. Wow. There we go. This is what I'm shooting for. One of the new features that we see with version 1.2 is that we can go in and take a look at our signal to noise ratio for our multi-gig. So if we're trying to figure out why we're not getting 10 gig, but we're getting 5 or 2.5, we can come in here and it's going to show us what our signal to noise ratio is. So this gives us an idea of our Ethernet signal versus the noise we're picking up on there. For each of our channels, it's going to tell us what our threshold is. And so we see that our minimum right there was 5.1 dB and our threshold was 5, so we passed for that. So this helps us troubleshoot problems with connecting at multi-gig. Another new feature in here is our periodic auto test, which, let's disconnect that cable just to see. And this is a new feature with the periodic auto test. We can set this up to run on a regular interval. So I can say that I want to run this, I want to run it every minute, I want to do that for 2 hours, and it will run these auto tests on that interval and upload those test results to Link Live. So, talked about a lot of tools so far this morning: Link Runner G2, AirCheck G2, EtherScope nXG. I am going to be doing these every month. If you go out to that URL right there, they'll be listed out there. Today, this afternoon, I'm going to put out the next couple months. So again, I hope you found this to be useful. You have my email address. If you have any questions, if you need any training, give me a shout and we will get you trained up and make sure you're getting the most out of these tools. So again, thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you in a future webinar.